A few years ago, I went to hear a great jazz band live. The concert was fantastic, full of energy, spontaneity, and improvisation. But after the concert finished, I overheard someone talking in the row in front of me. The person was complaining that the band was not improvising. And the reason this person had this impression was because there was sheet music on the stage. Honestly, I was surprised by that because I knew that the musicians were improvising most of the concert actually. But this situation made me realize once again that if you're not a jazz musician, it can be hard to know what's going on during a jazz performance. And there are quite a few misconceptions about jazz out there. So I want to use this video as an opportunity to give a clearer picture of how jazz and jazz improvisation in particular works. A lot of people think that jazz is all about just making stuff up on the spot. And this might be partly true, but there's still a structure behind it. So here's how it usually works. The first step for the musicians is always agree on what song to play. Let's take for example Autumn Leaves. If we look at this sheet here, we see a melody and a chord progression. The chords are here written down as symbols above the melody. Melody is simple to understand, right? But chords can be a little abstract. You can imagine chords as the background colors of a painting. They're supposed to bring out and support the melody more. So a typical jazz group might consist of a saxophone player, a piano player, a bassist, and a drummer. The saxophone player will usually play the melody, and the piano will play the chords. The bassist joins the pianist and outlines the chords with his bass lines. And most importantly, he keeps the tempo. The drummer supports the bass in keeping the tempo, and together they create a groove. So our band, our jazz quartet, starts to play, and they first play the melody of Autumn Leaves from the beginning to the end. This is also called the head-in. Once the melody is finished, the musicians jump back to the beginning of the form. And each musician will now take the turn and solo over the form of the song, often going through the whole song several times. After each musician played a solo, they return one last time back to the melody. This is also called the head out, and then they finish the song. So to summarize this, if you go to a jazz concert, what you can usually expect is that most songs follow this structure. There's maybe an intro before, like a drum intro or something, then the melody starts, the head in, then there are solos taken by all the musicians or some of the musicians, and then there's the head out, so the melody once more to finish the song. If the musicians know the songs well and they've played it many times, they will not need any sheet music for that. They will have it probably memorized. But if it's new material, it's quite common to see jazz musicians on stage using lead sheets for that. What they're reading from this is first of all the melody in the beginning, and then when they're soloing, they might use it to read the chords. But this doesn't mean that they're not improvising. Now, in most musical genres, there is some spontaneous interaction on stage. But in jazz, the spontaneous interaction is really at the core of the music. You can imagine this like a conversation between friends. One person is saying something, the other person is reacting to it, a third person might pick up one idea and build on that, and so on. So what could happen during a jazz performance is that the soloist plays a specific rhythm and the drummer catches it and responds to that. Or the pianist plays maybe an unusual chord that is not originally in the tune, and the soloist picks this up and plays something that fits this new chord. This is the real-time dialogue that really makes jazz performances unique. If you could hear the same jazz band play the same tune 5 times, each time the tune would sound differently. Of course, coming up with spontaneous ideas on the spot is really not an easy task. If you think about it, composers often have weeks or months to come up with a strong melody. As an improviser, you need to create something meaningful within a split second. So when you hear a great jazz solo, you hear the results of thousands, if not even tens of thousands of hours of practicing, listening, and experimenting. Maybe while you're watching this, you might be wondering, how do jazz musicians actually learn to improvise. There is and always has been a group of people that is saying that you cannot learn how to improvise. Either you can improvise or you can't. And to clear this up, this is absolutely not true. Improvising is a skill that you can learn. Most jazz musicians start out by copying their favorite musicians, like John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, or Thelonious Monk. So they would sit down with a record they like and try to copy it note by note. But in jazz, copying others and sounding like someone else is absolutely not enough. The real goal, and this is what fascinates me the most about jazz, is to find your own voice as an improviser. All the great jazz musicians developed such a unique sound that you can recognize them after just hearing a few notes. In that way, jazz is all about individuality. And ideally, when you have a quartet on the bandstand, you have 4 different personalities. But at the same time, when you play together in a jazz band, it's also all about listening to each other, collaborating with each other, and reacting to other musicians' ideas. It's a lot about respecting each other and making each other sound as good as possible without losing your own artistic identity. That's why people often say that jazz is a reflection of democratic values. I could talk about jazz for hours still, but I will leave it here for now. If you have any remaining questions, let me know down in the comments. And if you're a musician and you're now curious to start improvising yourself, I've created an ebook for beginning improvisers that you can find on my website. I will leave the link up here. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support me, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. See you next time.